Hello good people and welcome back to Level Up Your Chess Strategy. It's part 5. It's no question that if you want to increase our playing strength and thereby level up our ELO as a consequence, then there's no question that our chess strategic strength will also need an actual boost. Today we're going to look at a strategic concept called open files and diagonals demonstrated to us by chess masters of the old. In the 1920s, to be exact, during the Capablanca and Alekhine golden era. Let's boost that ELO. Let's get it.
Round 1. Fight!
There's this idea in chess that rooks belong in open files and should be doubled in open files, and bishops belong in open diagonals, and nothing should restrict their long distance kind of power. In this position, I think it's better to demonstrate what I mean in terms of it's white to play and take advantage of this open file. Now, this could get complicated, but I just want to give a general idea as to, say you end up in a deadlocked position like this and it's white to move and gain ground, gain advantage. What is the most effective way to open this and just dominate the file? You'll hear that a lot if you're studying chess actively and or through chess books, dominating a file or a diagonal. Here it's white to play and gain advantage. The answer in 3, 2, and 1. White plays h4. We're going to label that as a good move. Now black has to take, because say if you play King 2, then you can't take because you drop. So h4, the attempt to open and kind of dominate this file. G takes h4, and now rook takes h4. And now c7. How do you continue to dominate this file given that it's your move as white? The answer in 3, 2, and 1. And good people, it's not this move, by the way. Black will not foolishly take that and just simply plug. And I want you guys to have a look at this memory marker. If you can still and instill the possibility of dominating a file, then plug the pawn. Rook to h5. And there is a line here where black really fights tooth and nail, and that's king to b6. But since we're not grandmasters here, say king to d7. You guys know what the next move is? Of course, it's g5. And you can't avoid the loss of a pawn, and then the king will migrate here, and you'll win the game. So just that quick concept of open the file, keep the tension in the file, plug the file, and now take advantage of the position. Because now this pawn is yours, and it's going to charge through. So this model game that we're going to look at is between Efim Bogolyubov versus Frank James Marshall. That took place in 1924, US of A, New York, New York. These guys are strong masters of the Capablanca and Alekhine era, before the advent of the internets and supercomputers. So they're all using kind of their own knowledge unassisted, without massive databases that's available to us now. Oh, before I forget, if you find this content helpful, it's boosting your chess strength in your chess journey, please leave a like and sub. You have my gratitude. Let's get started. White starts with knight to f3. The ready Zuckertort. d4, d5 by black and white. e6, bishop to f4, eyeing c7 there. And now bishop to d6. Should you take? That nullifies your bishop. Both develop. Who's the better? e3 by white. Now that does double up the f file, but the thing is, after take, there is a nice control over e5, and it's a strategic idea. So he offers it. Black takes it. Bishop takes f4, e takes f4, c5. Now, striking to undermine the influence there on e5. D takes, queen to a5, c3. Takes, and now bishop to d3. Knight to f6, castle kingside, both complete the development. Knight b to d2, and now knight to c6. Knight to e5. A move like knight to e5 does two things. One, after takes, it undoubles the pawn. And two, it plugs this square, allowing, if captures, black, or rather white, to have the d6 and the f6. And you'll notice this bishop becomes a little troubled in terms of development, and white gains space. So, is that two things? Maybe three things. Anyways, knight to e5. Rook to d8. Rook to e1. Bishop 2. Bishop's got to develop somewhere. Knight f to d3, or knight d to f3. h6, preventing ideas of a sneaky knight to g5 there, hitting f7. g4 anyway. So, the idea is to weaken the square there, but to weaken the kingside pawns of the opponent. Maybe ideas here of a rook, but as you can see, if I can draw this well, in this position, goodness, okay, in this position, white does have a more active light squared bishop. And there's more pieces encroaching the king side. So aggressive, but probably necessary. Knight takes, knight takes. Surprisingly, well, it's not surprising, because if you took here, this does drop. So that's not good. Knight takes. You keep the double pawn. There's tension in the middle there, because this can be pushed at white's whim. Now bishop to c6, a better square, liberating this idea. If pushes in the middle happen, it's allowed, and you can now punish this push because, well, yeah, this could get ugly. Queen to e2, just removing the queen out of the potential x-ray and open file, a cannon in front of your queen. Knight to e4. You don't want to take, because that becomes a monster pawn supported by a bishop that's now, hey, we're pretty active. So rook a to d1. Rook to c8. Just developing moves from both sides. And now king to g2. A little crazy looking, because you're aiming. You're having your king aim at this side. But I think, in my non-grandmaster eyes, he's avoiding this idea, just unpinning, but keeping the king active here. Bishop to a4. It's one of those moves where you're wondering, what's the point of that move? Well, it's a good move to poke through the pawn structure. Another concept, but not the main focus. If you push here, this retreats, but now this pawn is brittle, because it's attacked by a central knight, a queen, and a rook. So white understands that. He's already kind of punished his pawn structure for territory, so he just shuffles the rook. None of that kind of pawn structure restructuring, ruining. Now f6. f6 does, well, one thing. The first thing being telling the knight at e5 to buzz off, but it does have drawbacks. When you move a pawn, because pawns don't move backward, it does make the pawn beside it weaker. In fact, it makes a pawn beside it, or the square beside it, weaker. So knight goes back to f3. And now you can see this is white's weakness. This is black's weakness. Bishop to c6. Now knight to d4, centralizing the knight, threatening a fork, but more importantly, just plugging that square from turning into a deadly square, a monster bishop of some sort. Queen to d6 defending, and now f3. It's now white's turn to tell this strong knight to please get off my lawn. Knight to c5, and here is where the actual study starts. I want you guys to look at the position. Both have knights and bishops, but qualitatively, let's assess the position. This looks a little brittle. This is white's weakness. But then you notice this. There is a light squared weakness, kind of entry point to maybe the king there. How do you take advantage of that now that this is being attacked? This is a strategy session after all. The answer in 3, 2, and 1. In this position, Bugolyubov, if I'm saying that correctly, plays bishop to b1. That is a strong move and a good move. You don't trade that piece, especially if you can keep harassing the Dark King on this diagonal. So, strong move. Bishop to d7. Defending, but also avoiding the capture of that pawn. But white just plays simply. Queen to c2. Now you have a real nagging threat on h7. This is the concept of open diagonals. And maybe open files later. f5 trying to plug that. Now tripling the pawn, but that doesn't matter. After takes, knight takes, hitting the queen. And now there's an isolated pawn. And now the other thing about that is there's multiple threats. You cannot ignore this. You can't ignore the check. And you can't ignore now this open file, which threatens a fork. So check first. Mind you, imagine if your king wasn't here, that'd be a dream to just fork. But these are masters after all, without the aid of Stockfish and or all the literature that we have. So simply blocks, preserves it. Takes and takes. Black has to take this monster queen because, well, one, it's an absolutely full-grown monster, and two, white has such a strong influence in the open diagonal, and black understands that very well. So, removes it, but white is winning positionally here. Why is that? Because this pawn is weak. This rook is more active. White just has technically more play, active play in the position. It has like stronger squares, essentially. So knight to e6, then knight to e2, defending. Also defending this. And keep an eye how Efim Bugolyubov outplays Frank Marshall here. Frank Marshall is not a patzer, very strong, strong master. Rook to f8 attacking. You could move your king there. But Frank Marshall chooses blood and activity. Pushes the knight, which allows what? Knight to d8. And now it allows the knight to go back on d4. Now it cannot be kicked out. It's a beautiful square. I can't, as a person that just looked at this game maybe like 2-3 times, it's not an attacking stellar game where you're like, ooh, this is very Kasparovian, this is very Aliekin, this is Misha Tal. This is how you win chess games, especially because not many of us are like Misha Tal and or Garry Kasparov, where we can calculate dynamic positions. This is the grind that you need to win. Knight to d4, centralizing the knight and protecting this pawn 2 ways. And now this pawn is eyeing e6. It's beautiful, guys. Knight 2, c6, but now you have bishop 2, b3, trying to boot that out, and this is weak. Who gets to have more tempo? Well, if your king is in check, that's a tempo. Bishop takes, bishop 2, takes on d5, king moves, and now takes this. Qualitatively, in open positions, a bishop is better, but if you have a knight there that's just hanging out like a total leviathan, that's a better deal. So remove the other knight so you can't kick out this knight. After takes, you fracture the structure. So kind of twofold here. This is a weaker set of pawns than 3 versus 2. And now here we go. I have to say that. And now here we go. The idea of an open file. Rook to e5. With tempo attacking that. So it moves away. And now b4 prophylaxis. Preventing b5 from being pushed. And if need be, you can use that as an anchor. Rook to f6, and now rook to e1, just dominating the file. Let's look at the eval quickly. It's 2.4. That's massive in an endgame. King to h7, and now rook to a5. Remember when I mentioned, guys, that we've established the open file, and because this pawn structure is fractured, you can attack the pawns. And black can't do anything but defend them awkwardly. Rook to c7, now rook to c5, yet again. Pushes here. Options. a6, a4. Rook to c8, again putting in a defensible square. And now h4, preventing a push. Rook to g6. He plays king to h2. I don't particularly understand why. Again, I'm not a grandmaster. I'm curious if he was afraid of threats from bishop to h3 and pushes here. But the stronger move is essentially to move the king to f2. Instead, he goes to h2. Sure. Rook to f8, now h5. Making this structure there on g6 awkward. Rook to d6, now rook to e7. The rook on the 7th rank, pinning. This is a weak square. You can go back here to re-access that if need be. King to g8. Rook to a5, nagging that again. Rook to a8, and now rook to e4. I do wonder why he didn't start moving the king, but sure. Rook to e2, g6, takes and takes. And now rook to e5 again. There's the idea of rook to e7 to lose that. Rook to d8, check. King moves back. And now this, it's a good move. Takes, takes, and fork. And in this kind of position, if you're up this much material in terms of pawns, 3 versus 2, yeah, you'll have the guts to do these kind of exchanges, and you have to diminish the position. And there's a twofold reason why he did that, because he just plays knight to c6. If you take, you can still dilute the position with this move. And now it's 4 versus 2 because this pawn's gone. White is winning this. That's not what happened, of course. He saw that. So he didn't take. Instead, he took on c6. Takes here with tempo. He achieved the same goal. Takes, push, and now, yeah, the game's done. It's fairly straightforward. It's not difficult to win this ending. So, quick recap. Knight to f3. d5, d4, e6, bishop to f4, bishop to d6. A little highly positional, but also little question mark as you're doubling. But If you know how to maneuver around and protect it, sure. Takes, c5. Takes, queen to a5, c3 recovers, bishop to d3, knight to f6, castle, castle, knight b to d2, knight to c6, knight to e5, preventing that from developing, trying to acquire territory, prevents it, rook to e1, bishop to d7, knight to f3. h6, and now you've got the push to threaten expansion, aggressive expansion as the Joker would say. Knight to e5, you have to take, protect this. Now queen to e2, knight to e4, rook a to c8. You don't want that bishop to come alive. That would be open diagonals against you. Rook a to c8, king to g2. Avoiding the pin here, likely. Bishop to a4. Trying to bait white into committal pawn moves. Doesn't fall for it. Kicks out the knight. Knight to d4. A very optimal square threatening the fork, but also just centralized. Queen to d6, f3. And now starts the lesson of open diagonals. Boom. Takes. Boom. Blocks. Diminish the power of this Sauron-like queen and bishop battery. Protect. You push. He takes a square. Check. Leave the strong knight, angry knight in the middle. Boom, with tempo. Restrict. Double up. Attack the weak pawns. Pin the pawn. Restrict. Kind of sus, but sure. Push. Attack the weak pawn. Takes. Double up. Check. Tactic time. Tactic time. Check. Diminish the position. And win the endgame. Hope you guys found something useful for that. A lot of concepts in there, but just the main key points of open files, open diagonals, restriction. And yeah, he won the game. Hopefully, so can you. I'll see you guys later. Double peace.